A young musician taken way before his time, yet influenced generations to come, and a possible deal with the devil. You're listening to Speaking of Spirits. Join us as we discuss the life and legacy of blues guitarist Robert Johnson. Okay, welcome to this podcast. Today we are discussing the life and legacy of Robert Johnson. There's actually a couple of things about this. Robert Johnson has got two different legacies. One of them is a musical legacy. The other one is a little bit of a paranormal legacy, and we're going to discuss both of those today. So if you're here listening for a paranormal experience, we will talk about that eventually. We'll get to that here in a few minutes. Please bear with us as we talk about the music. If you're here listening for the music, we will be talking about the paranormal side. Either way, we're glad you're with us. Thank you. So, let's get started. Well, blues guitarist Robert Johnson is one of the most influential musicians to ever have lived. His music has been credited as an influence to performers such as B.B. King, Muddy Waters, Bob Dylan, Keith Richards, Chuck Berry, James Brown, Eric Clapton, the band Led Zeppelin, and many others. Members of the bands Rush and Slipknot both agree that Robert Johnson has played a major role in the development of rock music. So he was influential in quite a range of music. He was popular around the 1930s, and to this day, he's still influencing musicians out there. In 1990, Spin Magazine named Robert Johnson first on its list of 35 guitar gods. In 2003, Rolling Stone ranked him fifth on its list of 100 greatest guitarists of all time. And in 2010, Guitar.com rated Robert Johnson ninth in its list of top 50 guitarists of all time, 72 years after he passed away. So the legend of Robert Johnson is rather varied. The story is rather interesting as Robert Johnson, but it's always, whenever we have a case like this, I always like to start with, what do we know for sure? What are the facts of the case? And if you were like me, I was first introduced to the story of Robert Johnson with the 1986 movie Crossroads, starring Ralph Macchio and Joe Seneca. The movie Crossroads was a watershed moment in my life. It tells a story of Robert Johnson, but it features it from kind of a modern day guitar player, a young man coming up who was looking for a lost song by Robert Johnson. And the coming of age movie as he follows that. But the music in there was absolutely phenomenal. The blues music was played by a blues musician named Ry Cooder, who was absolutely incredible. And I remember the very first time I heard a song he did in there called Feeling Bad Blues. And that song is the reason whiskey was invented. It's just an absolutely incredible, great piece of music. I don't know if I've ever had a piece of music move me as strongly as that did when I first heard that. So that is kind of a personal thing for me, but the movie Crossroads, that movie also had some classical music and a little bit of rock music, both played by the same guy. It introduced the world to a guitar player named Steve Vai, who has since gone on to do pretty good for himself. So Steve's had a pretty outstanding career since then. But what do we know about Robert Johnson for sure? Well, Robert Johnson was born down in Mississippi, Hazelhurst, Mississippi, to be correct. It was around May of 1911. Some say May 6th. The exact day may or may not be true, but we know it's in May of 1911. And even coming into this world, he had a very interesting story. He was born out of wedlock after his mother, Julia Major Dodds, had an affair with a field hand named Noah Johnson. Julia's husband, who was a successful farmer and carpenter named Charles Dodds, actually had to flee Hazelhurst. Some say on reports that he was sharing a mistress with an Italian businessman, and some say it was due to a dispute with white landowners.
Or both.
Or both. Could be a combination, anywhere in between. Anyway, Charles had to leave town. He snuck out of town and ran away to Memphis. When he got to Memphis, he got most of their 10 children followed him to Memphis. And shortly after that is when Robert Johnson was born. When Robert Johnson was 7, his mother remarried and moved to Robinsonville, Mississippi. As he grew up, Johnson was reluctant to pick cotton, so he instead turned to the guitar and music to try to make a living. And he got started playing guitar on an instrument that used to be called a diddley bow. A diddley bow was a string that was nailed to the side of a shack or a building that had a glass bottle nestled in the bridge. It sounded a lot like a slide guitar that we would hear today. And in fact, that's where the performer Bo Diddley got his name from. He just reversed the words and became known as Bo Diddley. But a diddley bow was an instrument that they used down in the South, and that's how Robert Johnson got started playing. As he grew up, he started hanging around juke joints, stores, private homes, anywhere people would gather to mingle and dance. And when the hired musicians would take a break, Robert Johnson would ask to borrow their guitar, and he would play. And so he would borrow their guitar and he would play, and the only problem with that is that he was absolutely horrible. He was a contemporary son of blues legend Son House. And Son House tells a story then that he was playing a juke joint one night, and Robert Johnson, he gave Robert permission to play guitar while he was on break. And Robert just cleared the place out. Everybody just left the building trying to get away from him. You know, people coming up to Son and saying, man, you got to take that guitar away from him. He's killing us. So the only problem is that at this point, Robert Johnson was absolutely horrible.
They said that he was okay on harmonica, though.
I had not heard that, so that's pretty cool. That's good if he was okay. Yeah, but I guess on guitar, he was just not
Horrible.
good.
Very
not
bad.
good. So when Johnson was 17, though, he actually fell in love and got married. He married a girl named Virginia Travis. At the time, Johnson was 17 and Virginia was 14, and both of them lied about their age on their marriage certificate to get married. But he loved her so much that he kind of stopped playing for a while and got a job in the fields. Going back. As they were married, as time went on, she became pregnant and was going to have a baby. She left to go back to her hometown of Penton, Mississippi, and so her family could help her raise the baby. Johnson followed her, but along the way he made stops playing gigs wherever he could, trying to play guitar. And by the time he got to her house in Penton, he had found out that both Virginia and the baby had died during childbirth, and both of them had already been buried. And by all accounts, this just absolutely devastated Robert Johnson. Just absolutely destroyed him. And I don't think this helped him any, but Virginia's family was very, very religious, and pretty much said that this was justification for Robert singing secular songs, or was known at the time, selling his soul to the devil. Blues historian Mac McCormick believed that Robert accepted this phrase as a definition of himself, and after that he used it to describe his resolve to leave a settled life as a husband and farmer to become a full-time blues musician, traveling around playing guitar. But this, by all accounts, this particular incident just absolutely devastated Robert. And right after that, he tried to play again at a juke joint with Son House, and pretty much everybody just turned against him. The whole audience turned against him. So Robert just left. He just left town. He just fell off the planet. Nobody knows where he went. Nobody's heard from him during this time. And the amount of time he's gone varies. Some say it was 6 months. Some say it was 18 months. But he was gone for a while. Really, nobody knew where he went or what he did. He reappeared in Banks, Mississippi at another show that Son House was doing. He asked Son if he could play, and Son gave him permission, probably because Son House was feeling bad for him. And he gets up there and plays, and immediately everything had changed. Son House and everybody else in the place stood there with their jaws open at the end of the song. Robert Johnson had transformed so much in that period of time. He has become an incredible guitar player. And there's a story that Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones, the first time he was introduced to Robert Johnson, he said, "Who else is playing guitar?" And it was just Robert Johnson by himself. He sounded like two people playing guitar all by himself. And he just came out being this incredible guitar player. So he then starts becoming a professional musician. He's traveling around. 1936, he had a chance to record his music. He recorded his first single, Terraplane Blues, sold about 5,000 copies, earned him another recording session. He eventually went on to record 29 songs. Robert Johnson, only 2 years later, in 1938, died at the age of 27.
Part of the infamous 27 Club.
Part of the infamous 27 Club. And I don't know where he falls, but he might have been one of the first ones to be in that club. But he passed away at 27 years old, 1938, Greenwood, Mississippi. Now, as with the rest of his life, there is controversy surrounding his death and his burial. A lot of people say then that he was actually poisoned. He was doing a show there in Greenwood, Mississippi, and it is reported that he was flirting with a married woman in the audience, and so her husband gave Robert Johnson a bottle of poisoned whiskey, which Robert Johnson then drank and was sick for 3 days before he finally passed away.
Yeah. A lot of people say that they saw him on all fours acting like a dog right before he died, too.
That could be, yeah.
What's the infamous 27?
The infamous 27, there have been a number of entertainers, musicians, actors who
Not
have
just,
passed away
but
at
like prolific.
Yeah. And they all seem to be outstanding, but they all pass away at the age of 27. 27 seems to be a hard age to get past.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll takes a
I
toll.
guess so.
I guess it does, yeah. That might be a topic for something one day. 'Cause why is it so hard to get past the age of 27? We don't know.
Well, Keith Richards hasn't done it.
Yeah.
It's true, but he's immortal, so.
There is that.
So, and there is currently 3 cemetery plots claiming to be the location for Robert Johnson. So even in his death, even in his burial, Robert Johnson has got questions and things. He actually sounds like he lived quite a life. He was sounded like it was pretty eventful there. So we're a paranormal podcast. Why are we talking about a blues musician? Well, this is where the other half of the legend comes in. The music side is how he influenced so many musicians, still to this day, is an influential musician and still influencing musicians that are coming up. The paranormal side. When Robert Johnson was gone from anywhere to 6 to 18 months, the amount of time that he changed, how much he changed in that amount of time, was considered phenomenal. And the story came out that Robert Johnson went to a Crossroads there in Mississippi and made a deal with the devil to play guitar. Sold his soul to the devil to play guitar. And that was the explanation for how he became so good in such a short amount of time. So we're going to talk a little bit into that today and find out what's going on with that. So that is also why you will hear the song or the term Crossroads associated with Robert Johnson, the movie I referenced earlier. That movie was called Crossroads. Robert Johnson and the Crossroads seem to go hand in hand because it is reported that at the Crossroads is where Robert Johnson made his deal with the devil. And again, to this day, there is a location where I think it's Mississippi 1 and Mississippi 8, NEAT, claims to be a location of the Crossroads. There's a location in Memphis, Tennessee, the Crossroads, that claims to be the location where Robert Johnson met the devil. So there's at least 2 locations that claim that's where Robert Johnson made his deal with the devil.
Yeah, it's off of Highway 61.
Mm-hmm.
They even still have, man, I don't even know the right word, a way to be able to play the guitar is you meet on the Crossroads, and you have to be there before midnight.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't miss the big black man, as they call it. And he comes and you give him the guitar. He tunes the guitar, plays a song, and gives it back.
Is that Robert Johnson?
That's who knows?
Up to interpretation.
That's your interpretation, but that's the myth and the legend, if you will. Mm-hmm. In fact, I guess that lots of folks are there lots of times right before midnight just to see. Which begs the question: would you sell your soul, just to play the guitar? Dun, dun, dun.
I'd have to think. I'll get back to you. Yeah, I know Highway 61's got a... in fact, if I remember right, there's on Highway 61 or just off of there, they've actually got a big marker location pointing it out. So.
Robert Johnson was here.
Yeah. This is where Robert Johnson sold his soul. I'm not exactly sure what the marker says, but it's down there. So.
Well, and I don't think it was really hard for people to come to that conclusion. Most of his songs are kind of dark or mention the devil. And as my friend Matt points out, he breaks the circle of fifths, which is kind of the Nashville picking style, if you will. And so it sounds a whole lot different than anybody else.
He's got a very unique sound, and that's one of the things I was going to talk about is that some of the song titles Robert Johnson recorded. Now remember, out of the 29 songs he had, his song titles were Preachin' Blues, Up Jump the Devil, Being the Devil Blues, Hellhound on My Trail, If I Had Possession Over Judgment Day, and of course a song called Crossroad Blues.
Dun, dun, dun.
So yeah, if you're somebody looking at this and looking at this story, and then you're looking at these songs that Robert Johnson wrote, it's easy to make these connections and come up with this legend.
Yeah.
That he sold this. But what I did find out is that during the time that he was gone, he actually hooked up with a guitar instructor named Isaiah Ike Zimmerman. He was in Beauregard, Mississippi. And Ike kind of took our Robert in and mentored him on guitar, and they would go down to the cemetery to practice. Now, they went down to the cemetery for one reason, so that they could be alone, so they could listen and focus on it, and also so they would not bother other people. And Ike himself says, I don't care how bad you are, out here you're not going to bother anybody. So that probably gives an indication of where Robert Johnson started with Ike at that point. You know, to go out into the middle of the cemetery so you're not bothering anybody. But then this is just another aspect of the story that lends, credence to the legend of selling your soul to the devil.
I wonder if that says something about us as a people, too, that we'd rather believe that the devil gave this guy powers than it took him 6 months to 18 months to all day and night practicing the guitar to get to where he was.
That's a very good point of this, because, if you practice every day, you've got nothing else going on.
Yeah.
And especially if you've got a good teacher, you can become very good in a relatively short amount of time.
Or you can just ask the devil.
Possible, yeah. But when you do something like that, anytime you get so focused on achieving a goal, I think when you do achieve that goal, there are going to be people that will try to discredit it.
Oh, for sure.
Because you're, on a certain point, you're bringing up that they're not living up to their potential.
Mm-hmm.
So they will come up with anything they can to discredit a person's success.
That's right.
But his song titles were telling. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He wasn't I mean, the blues is the blues, right? But still, he speaks of the devil over and over and over.
He speaks
again.
of the devil. The once hellhound on my trail. That's kind of a, obvious.
Yeah.
Me and the devil blues. So yeah, a lot of his song titles are kind of. This is one of the things that I've never been able to find out if Robert Johnson was ever aware of that aspect of his story. If he ever heard anybody mention that, talk about it, discuss it.
Or maybe that's what he wanted.
Or maybe that's what he wanted. That's what it's... after his wife died and her family, again, pretty much blamed him for it. And the historian that was researching that pretty much says at that point, Robert Johnson just accepted that almost as an identity.
Yeah.
So maybe at that point, he just says, well, if that's what you're going to call me,
that's what I am.
That's what I'm going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so he turns, he works that for all it's worth. So,
yeah. Well, and for me, when it all boils down, selling your soul is a metaphor. So he was putting everything he had into that, into playing the guitar.
Oh, see, now that I like that. I've never heard of that before.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, using the phrase "sell your soul" as a metaphor, that very well could be.
Mm-hmm. By golly, he did it too.
And he did, yeah. And he came out the other side. So that's good. Yeah, that's a really good example. I like that.
Yeah. And we all do it.
Mm-hmm.
In one way or the other.
Yeah.
Pay those bills.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to pay the bills, man.
That's right.
Robert Johnson also went on to write some songs that are still recorded, re-recorded, used today. He wrote Walkin' Blues, I Believe I'll Dust My Broom, Come On In My Kitchen, and the classic that's still played over and over today, Sweet Home Chicago. Came from Robert Johnson. The only other thing I would say is that there is, adding to this story, however you want to take it, there's only 2 verified known pictures of Robert Johnson. In the one, he has a cigarette in his mouth and he's sitting in front of a white cloth. Looks like a sheet or something, you can tell because it's kind of wrinkled behind him. Holding his guitar. But the second picture is the one that I like to focus on. The second one has Robert Johnson in a dark suit, wearing a hat. He's looking pretty dapper there. He's got his legs crossed with his right leg over his left. He's holding the guitar like he's playing it. But if you look at that picture, off to the right of the picture there is some smoke, fog, whatever, and I swear there is a face in that smoke. So if you want to look that up sometime, look up pictures of Robert Johnson. There's only 2 pictures of Robert Johnson available, and it's the one of him in the suit. And off to the right side of the picture, I swear there is a face in the smoke there. So, again, just another level of the story, something to add to it, adds to the legend.
Well, that was interesting.
Yeah, the whole thing's really interesting. There's a lot of modern folklore all over. We've been talking about the 27 Club a lot. I think I first really heard of the 27 Club when Amy Winehouse died. Mm-hmm. And then they did a movie on Netflix, I believe.
Really?
And they documented everybody.
Yeah.
And it's a crazy thing. If you look sideways at something every once in a while, it gets you going down the rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
And that definitely did for me. And that's probably when I first really looked into Robert Johnson and the stories and and how he influenced and how brief a time that he was actually around to make music. Was it 2 years?
Well, from the time he first recorded till the time he died was 2 years.
2 years.
He recorded in 36 and he passed away in 38. So yeah, got 29 songs in 2 years.
Yeah, it's
And
crazy.
songs that are influencing people
Today.
now.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, and they've influenced some of the greatest entertainers we have today, and he's still influencing people who are coming up.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
He's quite the guy,
Yeah.
and it's quite the story. I think that anybody who takes the time to look into it gets something else out of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's
There's
pretty awesome.
definitely a lot of aspects to it.
Oh, for sure.
You know, a lot of angles, a lot of the places you can go with it. So
You can pick your own rabbit hole.
absolutely, absolutely. So the legend of Robert Johnson. What do we know about him? He was a phenomenal guitar player. Eventually.
Yeah.
So there's also a lesson here in sticking to your dreams and working hard and going for them. That's definitely a part of Robert Johnson's story. But he eventually became a phenomenal guitar player, musician who's still influencing people today, influenced some of the greatest musicians we have alive today. Did he sell his soul to the devil to get his talent? I don't think so. I think he had a tragedy happen. I think that tragedy affected him. I think he turned a lot of that energy into chasing his dream. He learned a style of playing guitar that was unique, and he worked on it, perfected it, became good at it, and took it out to the world. That's my take on it. I know he's got some great music. He's influenced a lot of musicians. I like to listen to his stuff. Like to listen to a lot of musicians that, he influenced. So, Robert Johnson, fascinating story. He lived a very eventful life for 27 years. Did he sell his soul to the devil? I don't believe he did. I think he just got really focused, and he's one of the few who achieved his ultimate potential.